Next up, Jared Stevens from Hanover College. And he will present on listening versus reading, a battle of retention.
Yeah. So, we use our vision and hearing a lot. I mean, they're the primary modalities by which we acquire information. Now, that being said, both of them have active and passive aspects. We hear things all the time. The random little background noises that I can't hear from most of you because you're muted. You're hearing those. But on the active side, listening right now, presumably, you're listening to me speaking to you. Vision is similar. I mean, obviously, it's not the same thing as hearing. But you can see things. Well, yeah, everybody here can see things. The more active aspect of vision, at least in the context of this study, is reading. Reading is putting effort behind looking at something, words on a screen. Now, given that we are given that we are learning creatures, we use these modalities to learn. And the study that I have, not so pleasurably done over the course of this year, examines these the modalities of vision and hearing and short-term memory. Not necessarily learning, but it's a stepping stone. So the material on this is very, how should I say, mixed. The results are kind of messy. There's not really, the scales aren't tipped in any one direction. And there are, it's not very conclusive whether or not, oh, well, listening leads to better learning or reading leads to better learning. There's I can't answer that question directly, which is why I did the study, to kind of tip the scale a little bit, although I'm getting ahead of myself. The primary study that I worked with was a study by Rogowski and colleagues that was done fairly recently. It was directed to me by a helpful resource. And basically my study is a vastly stripped down version of the Rogowski study. And well, over the course of the rest of this presentation, I'll kind of get into that. Now, the important concept here is working memory, which is essentially short-term memory. I imagine some of you took learning, so these concepts are familiar. So I perceived that audio processing, listening, takes a lot less effort than actually reading. And the reason, and this leads into my hypothesis, the reason why I thought about this is because considering what reading is taking words, which are phonetics, phonemes, sounds. Words are sounds, but words are silent unless they're spoken. When reading words off of a page, a screen, whatever, we take that in, convert it into sound in our mind, and process it that way, which sounds like it takes considerable effort when compared to merely hearing someone say something or hearing a noise. Now, that leads into the study purpose. As I said previously, the material that I did look into has yielded mixed results, not one way or the other. And so I'm just adding to the body of work. I'm not doing anything big. I'm not starting a revolution. And from there, I predicted correctly, that the readers who, the people who I sorted into the reading group would do better than those who were sorted into the listening group. Now, my entire sample was Hanover College students, and everybody here should be familiar with that demographic, for better or worse. And I didn't actually collect any demographical data, so I don't have any more information than that. And basically, I had a sign-up sheet outside of the testing area, the little lab room that I grew very fond of, and anybody who came in, they were sorted into reading or listening groups, and they were given essentially the instructions that they will either be reading or listening to a 1,500-word fictional piece written by me, and then given a multiple choice test. The test was, well, it was half multiple choice, half fill in the blank, so 10 and 10, evenly. Now, the test was administered 10 minutes after the material was first given, regardless of condition. And 10 minutes was chosen specifically because the recording of me reading the piece was 10 minutes long. So the readers were given the exact same amount of time just to kind of deal with that, kind of keep things as even as possible. Assignment into groups was random. Originally, I was going to base it on the time slot signed up for, but then after that first week of no signups, I decided to just randomly assign. Now, given that the entirety of the sample were Hanover College students, there was the possibility, and of course it did happen, that some of them would come to me seeking research participation credit for a class they were taking. Now, to get that research participation credit, all that is required is that you, at least in the instance that I experienced, all I had to do was sign a form and give up the debriefing form. The debriefing form and my signing of the page that was presented to me was not dependent upon performance, which means that participants could come in, throw out whatever answers they wanted on the multiple choice test, get their debriefing form, leave, and get credit, which isn't exactly healthy for a research sample. Because of that, I put in a contingent rewarding system that was based on the score correct on the final test, and the reward that was given in accordance with the scale on screen was a mixed. Participants got to kind of like reach into a bag of different kinds of chocolate. I think they were like Twix bars, Snickers, M&Ms, stuff like that. They got to reach in there and take a certain amount of rewards based on their performance. Now, given all that, they were recruited I emailed the professors, I think twice. There were sign-up sheets that I kept regularly updated outside of the research room. I spoke to people, said, hey, come do my thesis, I need people. And originally, I was hoping that I would get 20 people per condition for a total of 40 participants at minimum. And then after some time with no participation, that was cut in half to 10 per condition for a hopeful minimum of 20. But then with the current situation regarding some microorganisms, that was cut even shorter, and so I have been left with a sample of 12 people that were almost completely evenly divided into the two groups. Now, jumping straight into the results, the reading group, in accordance with my hypothesis, did much better. In fact, they almost did twice as good as the listeners, which I expected there to be a difference, but not that much of a difference. And also the results are very highly significant. This isn't just, this isn't something you can get from people throwing out random answers. This is something. So what are the implications? What does this mean? So obviously, as can be considered from the sample.
2 minutes.
Okay. As we consider from the sample, it looks like, at least again from the results, that lecture, or at least, information by means of audio, is not necessarily an effective modality by which to put things into short-term memory. Now, this is especially relevant considering how, well, all of us are kind of Zoom bound, and for the in the near future, like another week or two. But it might be appropriate, especially if backed up by further research, for if something like this happens again, to have a suitable balance of reading assignments and maybe not so much online lecture for classes that are very heavy with that kind of thing. Now, for future directions, obviously, this is a very stripped back study that has been even further stripped back by the circumstances of world events. So obviously, a full redo of the study is, not out of the question in order to either disprove or better solidify the results. Obviously, a study that actually observes differences in different demographics would also be appropriate. And there's a lot of different directions this can go, and in the past it has gone many different directions. But I stripped it back to kind of get a general overview, and then, given that we are all at home and whatnot, it was even further stripped back. And while that's regrettable, I'm working with what I have. Questions?
Just a reminder, we're shooting for everyone asking at least one question. We've just got Jared's and one other presentation today. So what questions do you have?
I have a question.
Fantastic. I'm listening.
So if what do you think the difference would have been if you had somebody else read the story instead of you? Like, could it have been different in retention if it had been like a female voice reading the story rather than you?
That's possible. I considered the possibility of doing that. However, as some of you may know, my circle of close associates, for not using the F word there, is non-existent. So I didn't exactly have that resource. So yes, I do think that it is possible for different voices to elicit different effects. Perhaps if I had a professor read it, it would carry a little bit more. I certainly would have been less embarrassed during the listening groups. But I think it would have made somewhat of a difference, yes, possibly. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Okay.
Did you notice anyone, or did you make a point to tell people not to get on their phones or whatnot? I just wonder if they weren't distracted by something else going on.
I didn't need to say that, but I did keep watch over people while during the 10-minute period. The readers, they read the entire time. They read all the way up until I got up and said, okay, I need it's time for the, here's the test. The listeners, yes, I was somewhat worried about them getting on their phones, but they didn't. And so I didn't feel the need to tell them that. It's a possibility that, for a different group that might be necessary, but I didn't find the need.